You got it.
All right. Call to order the meeting of the planning board for Tuesday, October 13th, 2015. Is there anyone here to speak to something that is not on the agenda tonight? All right. Planning board minutes from our September 22nd meeting. Everyone have a chance to look at them?
Yep.
Any errors, omissions, corrections?
I'd like to get a clarification if I could. It said that for one of the tenants in the bottom of the first page, as to the 11 and 17 Highland Street properties, Denise Carey, resident at 17 Highland Street, previously stated that she'd like to see the property zone residential, but explained that was due to a mistake in terminology. I wasn't quite clear on what that meant, and I wondered if I could get an explanation.
I believe it was that the resident had thought it was zoned business residential.
General business.
General business.
A reference to business residential, some sort of combination that was unclear.
Thank you.
All right, anybody have any changes or amendments?
Make a motion, we accept the minutes of September 22nd.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstentions.
All right. Moving on to the public hearing regarding the zoning map amendments. So I believe that all we had left, Jessica, was the Highland Street property.
No, there's two issues. One
Two
was the
issues.
Highland Ave issue, and then the other one was in regards to Mr. Gall's submission of paperwork. He was not at the last meeting,
Right.
and so it was skipped until this hearing so that he could explain.
Okay.
So there are two.
All right. You guys want to join us in?
Yeah, it's, can I have a motion to open public hearing?
Motion, oh, go ahead.
No, no.
Motion to open the public hearing?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're good.
All right. I guess should we start with the issue of Mr. Gall's property? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Sounds good.
Is there someone here to speak to that tonight?
I guess I might.
All right.
I haven't been at any of the previous meetings, so forgive me if I skip over something that you know that I don't, or if I'm not as clear as I might be. But we are concerned about, I guess what we're concerned about is what you are doing in terms of the new map. Are you creating new zoning, or are you just reaffirming in a more clear way what the zoning is? I guess.
It's kind of a little bit of both. There were, I think, about 10 or 12 areas where there were two official maps that sort of disagreed with one another. So we've tried really hard to limit to just those areas where there were discrepancies and clarify where that boundary should have been, whether it's A or B, and not get into areas outside of those specific locations where there isn't a question on the official maps.
Okay. And so, well, that helps some. So what I guess what we're interested in is what areas of the new map are going to be adjusting something, and what are just clarifying what already exists.
Well, there were several areas that we dealt with at the prior hearings. I don't know if we have all the paperwork to go over the specific areas, but there was
We could, but.
quite a bit of discussion about it. I think we've kind of covered all of that.
Will we be able to see sometime today what you are going to do? Or?
It's behind the board. This is the most recently revised
So that's-
iteration of the map.
Okay, that's the new digital map at this point.
Well, that's what the board has
Tentatively, yes.
tentatively discussed, so this is the latest draft.
Okay.
But then the final version that we agree on here will go to the city council for approval.
Okay, and we'll get to see what that is.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Yes, sir.
Dan Hagan from City Council. With regard to Mr. Gall's property, I thought when we started the process, if I understood what Jessica said, we were only gonna do areas that were in some type of conflict on the mapping, and I don't believe, at least in the Highland area, both of the 295 maps have Mr. Gall's property the same, so I don't know why Mr. Gall would, at this point, I mean, certainly down the road, you know, anyone can go back for zone changes, but I don't see why you would entertain any type of change now to his property. As I said, both of the maps, that isn't one of the circled areas. You know, on that side, I mean, they're both the same on each of the 295 maps, so.
I think that's a fair statement. I mean, I don't think he's making.
No, I'm not
push
saying
for it
either.
right
I
now.
just-
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that was an area where there was discrepancy based on our conversations with him months ago when we first had this hearing, I think, so. Anybody else to speak about that specific property or parcel? All right, I guess.
So just for our clarification, so no, there's no changes saying as is.
Right. Right. All right, I guess moving on to the Highland Street properties. And I think just to sort of summarize, I think at the first meeting we had the residents there that were sort of in the flipped area about whether they were business or highway business or R15, had mistakenly requested that it be residential, and then they came to the last meeting and said they had misunderstood the terminology and requested that it be highway business, and that's what they had thought it was. And we'd agreed, I think, because there was some perhaps misunderstanding about the status of the decision, tentative decision at the first meeting, to continue it to today to see if there was other comments or information that people might have that they thought was relevant. And here we are. So I guess the residents are here, correct? Yeah, and you're still consistent, you still want to stay as a highway business, so that's what you believe that it should be? Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this issue? Yes, sir.
I provided a document for both chairs, ordinance and planning, and again, you know, I hate when two sets of constituents are kind of in conflict with each other, and but it's not really what the homeowners want, and it's not really what the butters want. It's really what the evidence says, or the preponderance of the evidence. And I tried to go back, and I thank Jessica, because Jessica did a lot of this research also. She went all the way back to 1901, where you see a map, which those were all small residential lots, 50 feet apiece, which I guess there was at one point the plan for hundreds of small lots and homes on both sides of Highland Avenue. So that was obviously residential then. You move up to the 1947, and you still have at least the area of where Mr. Stevens' house was owned by Mr. Gazda. Well, Mr. Gazda actually built it in 1955, and this is a 47 map, so it was before that. But those were 50-foot lots also, except for the end where that was East Hampton. For the ones that haven't been here for years, that was East Hampton Chevrolet, where East Hampton Tire is. The showroom is where the tire shop is, and where Papa George is where they used to store their vehicles, much like Cernak stores the new vehicles away from the showroom. So moving on up to 1983, that's when Mr. Dion buys Mr. Gazda's property, which included both the area where Mr. Stevens' house is and where Miss Carey's house is. He owned both. But I think the telling thing is in 1986, Mr. Dion divides the lots. And he has to, because, and I got this from Jessica, he was meeting the dimensional standards of R15 when he divided them. He had to get 100 frontage, so he made somewhat of a flag lot from Mr. Gazda's, and he had to get 100 frontage and 15,000 square feet, which is consistent with R15, and he does that in 1986. And this is when Miss Carey builds her house. So to me, it's very clear that it was obviously R15 then. Now moving up to today, or 1995, the two maps obviously are equal. They're both they're both official. One obviously has, they're both hand-drawn, which is kind of not probably the best that you would want. But there's nothing really that differentiates the two other than the hand drawing, except for the fact that if it was actually in highway business, or back then it was called, there was never any residential business. It was either general business, downtown business, neighborhood business, highway business. There was never any business residential. I know Mrs. Carey, somebody told her that, and I truly believe that's what she heard. But back in '95, Mrs. Carey actually put in a swimming pool, which if it was in highway business, it would have never been allowed, because she would have a non-conforming structure within the highway business. They wouldn't have allowed a swimming pool to go in. You can't put unless you're Teddy Bear Pools and are running a business, I don't believe you'd be allowed to have an above-ground pool in highway business. So that's '95, and then as you can see today, the final sheet is today, the cards from the assessor's office in both Mr. Stevens' house and Miss Carey's house are R15 zoned. It's right on the current thing, and there's nothing that they've presented other than that one hand-drawn map to me that's shown where there was ever a planning board, town meeting decision, city council decision, select person decision, back when we had select boards. So again, I don't think there's any facts that support the thing that it was ever business. Obviously, if a business went in someday, they have the opportunity to come back and ask for a zone change. And someone did mention the map behind you, which is the same company that we've hired to complete this. And I believe if you look at that map, they don't have those two homes in.
Well, that's what we said at the first
No,
meeting.
I'm just saying
It's based
that-
on what we decided at that first
Right,
meeting.
I'm just saying they don't have that
Yeah.
in there either. So again, and I don't believe Jessica's map by her desk, which she uses, has them in there either. I know I was in her office and we were looking, so. And again, at this point, I'll sit down and.
Can I summarize and just say that you're saying R15 is what it has been and should be?
I think everything I see is it was R15 or residential zoning, and I've never seen any other documentation other than that hand-drawn map, which is equal to the other, where it's ever been anything other than residential zoning, including today R15.
Anybody else have anything to say about this? Comments? Yes?
All I can say.
Can you just state your name and address again for us?
Denise Carey, 17 Highland Avenue. And when we purchased the property, like I stated before last time, I really didn't know what all the zonings meant. I don't know what R15 to this day means. Just a regular homeowner. After the first meeting, I went back and I was looking at all the zonings. When we purchased, we were told you could have a business in your basement if you wanted to. You're zoned for both. Now, he happened to say, I believe, business residential. Obviously, never was anything business residential now that I was looking at them. But we were all these years under the assumption that we could have either or both or whatever. And as far as us putting in a pool, I think the town maps were the town was kind of confused at that point too, so they gave us the go-ahead to put a pool in, but I don't think, looking at the map, they had us one way, they had us another way. I don't think the town really knew what it was either, but we got the permit to put the pool in. We just kind of wanted it to stay what we always thought it was.
Is there somebody else back there?
Yes. Irene Cludier, 16 Highland Avenue, right across the street from their property. Now, what is that gonna do to my property? Is that gonna be,
It doesn't change anything, it's just those parcels that we're discussing.
and it's off the, not even on the main highway, it's on a dead-end street.
So you believe it should be residential, R15?
Residential.
Anybody else have anything? Anybody have any questions, comments up here, thoughts?
I think at the last meeting, I was certainly open to considering what the residents had wanted it to be, and the question that I had raised was just making sure they were clear at the time that it could affect their property values if they went back to residential. But after seeing this additional information going back to 1901 and everything else, I mean, it really does appear that the city has always considered it residential. The question was really the two hand-drawn maps and which one was correct. And based on this, it certainly does appear that it's residential.
I concur. Our opinion.
I always know it's New York.
Harry, any thoughts?
Yeah, sort of. The people that you bought that house from, or you built the house from that piece of property, who told you it was his own business? Was it a lawyer that sold it to you, or a real estate agent, or who was it?
The guy that built it.
Does anybody know who that was?
Ron Lauren.
And where did he base his facts on? Did he just tell you that, at the top of his head, or?
We were just chatting and that's what he said.
Hey, Bryce, I'm
Sure.
Jim Stevens, I own 11 Highland Avenue. I really don't see what it matters because neither Janice or I are planning on selling. And if it is zoned highway business and someone wanted to put an addition on a house or something, they would have to come back to this committee and get it changed to residential, right? But being highway business, that keeps our options open. You know, who knows what may come down the pike in 5 years or 10 years. You know, so I prefer it be highway business because it would be easier to change it back to residential than it would be from residential to highway business.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Ken Bushy, 43 Highland. If it's highway business, they basically could open up, say, do automotive work in their yard. That would be an allowable business at this point. Say they decide to put up a garage or do stuff, and they say, well, I'm gonna fix cars or lawnmowers. As a highway business, they could do that.
I mean, if their property is owned highway business, they can use it for any of the uses that are,
If it's residential, you can't.
it's a different set of uses, so yeah. It's, obviously the business uses are much
Right.
smaller.
What,
Yeah, hold on one second. Yeah, no, keep going, Mr. Bushy.
What would be considered a business that could be run? I'm a small business owner myself. I do farm animal control, and it's based out of my house, but I really don't do any business there. I'm not bringing cars in to fix, I'm not making any noise, I'm not disrupting anybody. I go out off-site to do my work. So if it's business district, it would be, they could basically run any kind of business up to and including something that, say, could be noisy to the neighbors.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's much more permissive for the businesses you can run in a highway business district versus what you could do as a home occupation
Yeah.
or resident.
Okay, I'm just looking for
Yeah.
some clarity on that.
But you couldn't have a highway business intense project with somebody living in that house.
Right.
There's home occupation, which is one section of the zoning, which allows somebody to live in their house and then have some small businesses. But if it was zoned highway business, it could then therefore not be a residential use and be higher intense commercial uses. Do you understand the difference? Just wanna make
So
sure.
they could like knock the house down and put up a store.
Right, and have more significant business going on there than if you're just running a home occupation. which is
Right.
More like you described, sort of low impact on the
Yeah.
community kind of stuff.
So they could, at some point, run a business that could bring traffic in. Okay.
Just point, it's a little of what Jessica said, and I know Salem, we just changed the home occupancy business and made it larger, and that was one of Miss Carrie's concerns of running a business out of her home, as long as it met those home occupancy. I believe it's now at 20 25% Salem,
No.
or more, 33%, went from
33%.
25 to 33,
Yeah.
so you could actually use 33% of that home for a home business, as long as it's a home business within the thing. I mean, that's allowed now.
Keeping it as R15.
And keeping it as R15.
Keeping it as R15.
I definitely feel our role is to try and uncover this and sleuth this out more than, I really want everyone to be happy in East Hampton, I do, but even though it might be a case where I feel like we could change it for you, I don't think that's our role. That's my take, it's not appropriate. Ours is to find out what the history was and correct the maps to be to the history. I think to change it would be to come in independently, and that's my view anyway.
Just one other point.
Yes.
My wife runs a business out of the house now. So we've claimed that on our taxes for the last 15 years probably. And I'll bet you none of the neighbors even know that she has a business going on there. Right, she runs a business out of there.
That's what we were talking about, home occupations. You can have a business within your home, and actually, it used to be 25%, now up to 33% of the living space in the home can be used for the business and claimed on your taxes. But there are limitations on what you can do in that occupation, and I just passed back the new regulations, the new ordinances on that.
All the way in the back, did I see a hand there?
Oh, Chris Hagan, Highland Ave. I just wanted to say, we all know that she has a business, but it's house cleaning, so it's not done on site. There's no noise or anything.
Gotcha. Anybody, anything else? We're ready for a motion of some sort, or?
A motion that it be R15 for both properties.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Did you vote, Harry? Aye?
It was 5?
Yes. Do we need to do like a catch-all motion at this point, since we've sort of done all the parts, or, yeah? So, can I get a motion for the entire revised zoning map as we've done it? Or you guys should vote first, huh?
I don't know
Or
if we
you
need to
just-
vote on individual pieces.
On individual pieces,
I think
yeah,
we just wait
haven't-
for your.
We haven't done that in the past.
Can we get to see that before? We just wanna see where the line is drawn.
It's on the
The
wall.
line, the line is.
You can pull it off the
Highland
wall.
Avenue. Can we-
Is this one still relatively current? Except if you
No.
take out those two.
Oh, that one.
Because this,
If you take out these two.
those two would have to come out.
Yeah.
A map like that?
Hey, you guys wanna see this one?
Yeah, this would be helpful.
Those two properties are no longer.
I should say, since I haven't been at any of the other public hearings, I'll abstain from this unless other people feel that they want to have more time.
We think you are missing a significant portion. From that map there, we think you have drawn the line too far. When I look at it, it's northwest.
What's your name, sir, just for the minute?
Yes, I'm Tom Vincent,
Okay.
representing Bernard Gall. This,
So this was what we were discussing before, though, is that there were certain areas where we had two operative maps from 1995 that conflicted with one another. And so the purpose of this review was at those areas where there's a discrepancy to determine which line was gonna govern in those areas. We've encountered a few other properties, like I think Mr. Gall's, where he believes that perhaps it should be something other than what's shown on the official maps, but that's really outside the purview of what we're doing with this
so are you
process.
saying the map that he produced for you, which I believe is this one here, is not an official map? Zoning map of the town of East Hampton?
I don't know when that map is from, but it's not the most recent one.
Right.
So, the most recent one was this there were two in 1995, and there were some discrepancies between those and with the current map that we had done.
This is, you need a refresher, this is the packet that he submitted and was scanned and emailed to all of you. So what it was from a town meeting vote in 1986.
Yeah, and it shows that that line is drawn 300 feet from the midline of the road of Northampton. Street.
I mean, my position on this was that it wasn't an area where the maps disagreed with one another, which doesn't mean it can't be changed. I mean, if other board members feel differently.
Yeah, we'd like to point out that the 300 feet is clearly on your map here. You can see what I'm talking about. These two lots on Mr. Gall's property, and the way we measure the line out from the midline of this street is it would go to that line at least.
This one?
Yeah. That's how we measure it out, and with the materials supplied by Mr. Gall, there was a petition that was allowed, as we understand it, giving a meets and bounds description.
I just want to clarify what's in this packet.
Yeah.
So, sorry, everybody, we're like sardines today. The school committee wasn't meeting to be upstairs. So in addition to what he submitted, I went and I looked, and it had reference to Assessor's Plan 1967, sheet 29, which I was able to go back in the old files and find. And so this is a photocopy of those parcels. The parcels that are included are highlighted in blue. So I don't know how that matches up with whatever you're pointing out over there, but the numbers that have been circled are the parcels that were included in this town meeting vote of 1981.
Where's Highland Avenue?
One's probably here. So
Yeah,
those,
we're feeling that general business would include this one.
But it only listed, designated as parcels 129, 130, 131, 132, and 132A thereupon, containing approximately 725,000 square feet or more or less, of which parcel is more particularly bounded and described as follows. And then beginning at a point which is 300 feet east of said northwesterly side of Northampton Street.
Yep.
But in my interpretation, if it's not including those parcels that are referenced in the town meeting vote, I'm not sure what else it's supposed to be
I
including.
think the problem I'm having trouble with is that the meet and bounds description says 450 feet in length on two parallel sides, and then 300 feet east from the center throughout for the whole length, which would come up to here. And that's why we're thinking that one lot should be included in general business. I recognize it does not say on the reference to the lots on Assessor's Plan 1967, it does not refer to number 109, apparently, nor does it refer to number 108, and, or 107, which seems peculiar to me, given the map that was supplied as well. It looks like somebody had hand-drawn in a, well, that's, this line appears to be hand-drawn in, which is okay because our lot is within the white area, not the area in back, but we are within the white area, right up to the Highland Ave. So my concern is that along Highland Ave, 300 feet up should be included. Did you include the 300 feet here on the other side of Highland Ave?
I think that's the old 85 map, and if you
I
go
mean-
and you look at the
Yeah.
more recent versions of the
Yeah.
map, I think it was extended out.
Let's see.
See, you see a line that says 300 feet this way, it says 500 feet this way, and 800 feet down here.
Yeah.
So this is showing that the 300 plus the 500 together were incorporated, with the line stopping at about here, similar to this assessor's map from 1967.
I think the problem was, that I think both of these are in agreement on that, so it's not sort of the scope of our process right now. I think you know, there may be another way that you can clarify that or change it if it needs to be changed or what have you, but I think that that's sort of, we've kind of limited ourselves to just these areas where the official maps did not agree with one another.
Okay, so you're saying that these maps are consistent, thank you, that these maps are consistent, saying that,
Well, this is a discrepancy right here and here.
yeah, okay. Okay, and so you're saying these look consistent to you? And I'm suggesting that,
No, we're saying this is an inconsistency. That's why
Oh,
they're
okay.
circled.
all right, it is an inconsistency. Okay, and you're selecting one over the other. Okay. Well,
All right.
we think that that's missing out on the needs and bounds description, which I think should be involved.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Are we ready for a final motion?
I motion to approve the zoning amendments according to the latest draft. Close enough.
Including the changes that we've noted today?
Including those as well, yeah.
Including the changes. Okay, let's do it.
Do you need me to re-say that?
Please.
Okay. I motion to approve the zoning amendments according to the latest draft and including the changes made today.
Second.
10 seconds, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention?
I abstain.
I think we need to.
You don't need to do anything? Okay. All right, I guess that's it. Thank you all.
Can I have a motion to close?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? There we go.
All right.
See you now.
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow we have a committee. Yes.
To discuss.
We can, yes. I mean, it depends. Usually we don't vote until we get the recommendation. Now that we know what the recommendation is.
All right, folks, we have another item on the agenda, so if you're not sticking around for that, you can step out, that'd be great.
See you.
All right.
Just wondering what critter was running over my head. Critter? Mouse? I had that feel like when a cat walks by and its tail brushes up against you.
Yeah.
I don't have to.
You're thrilled to be here.
Right, so much fun, I'll stay.
Yeah, right. I know his name, it's, oh my god, help me. Jess, I'm sorry, Counselor. Nate. Nate.
Ziegler.
Sydney, thank you.
All right. Good night, thank you. All right, next up, there's a request from the City Council Public Safety Subcommittee regarding the Paul Street extension. Jessica, do you want to give us a little?
So, I know that it's been under council review for a while for accepting as a public way. A little back history, just to refresh your memory, is that we, based on the city engineer, he went out and he did an inspection and we released the remaining lots that he had under covenant in November of 2014. And the memo from Jim Gracia, the city engineer, said, in regard to the proposed release of the covenant for the remaining lots and the extension of Paul Street, I have no objections to the release of the remaining lots now that the final course of paving has been successfully completed. There may be minor items left to be done before the street is formally accepted by city council. However, the majority utility and roadway construction has been satisfactorily completed.
You can leave that door open. That's fine. Thank you.
So the planning board released the lots. So in terms of the planning board, they basically said we're okay with the project based on the city engineer's comments. So then it went forth to a public way acceptance, and I believe that the planning board considered the request in November 2014. And upon review of the special permit approval and definitive subdivision approval, that you voted, found that the conditions listed in the decisions were met to your satisfaction and voted 3-0 to recommend to be accepted as a public way. So, however, the council does not seem to be completely satisfied with the status of the road and it looks like the city engineer has kind of changed his mind as well. And so I guess that leaves it to, Counselor Hayes basically wanted the planning board, she sent it back for planning board. In my opinion, I'm not sure what the planning board has any teeth to do anything since you've already released all of the lots.
Right.
So, as I said to Counselor Hagan before the meeting, I'm willing to sort of be the intermediary between the developer and the city if needed, there are certain things that we need him to do. And I can convey that information to him saying, look, the council's not gonna accept this as a public way until you get all of these last items checked off and completed.
Right.
And that's where the teeth are.
And that's where the teeth are at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can take those lots back now.
No, we cannot take the lots
we're
back.
Sort of, is that, Councilor Hagan?
I just, again, I can't speak for Chairwoman Hayes, because it's, she chairs the committee, but I think her rationale, at least as I understood it at our meeting, was to send it back to the planning board really for clarification of what some of the decisions were, such as the lamppost. Was there a specific type of lamppost the planning board had wanted? I don't know if any of you have been up there for a while. It's kind of like, almost like a tall version of what you'd put on your driveway. It's like a colonial, it's not like a street light.
So this would be like an unofficial response to the city council, so then they can use that to basically.
Yes, I think that's what we went, and we certainly have no problem, at least I have no problem, and I don't think the other committee members, I think I can speak for them, have no problem with Jessica being the conduit between the developer and the city council to get some of these things. Another thing is like the cul-de-sac, there's nothing, we don't know, it's all overgrown now. Is that gonna be
It says in
maintained
here,
by the city?
The city of East Hampton is not responsible for the long-term
Right.
maintenance of the island in the center of the cul-de-sac. In accordance with the subdivision rules and regulations, the developer, its successors and assigns, or homeowner association will accept this responsibility.
Right, and that was our question, in other words, who, in your decision, was the developer saying he's gonna take it? Because we don't wanna accept it, because once we accept it, we kinda,
So the problem with
we
this,
kinda own it, or it'll just be overgrown and.
the problem with this too is that perhaps these two gentlemen were here, but I mean, the decision
Everybody.
is the decision, and so, I mean, we can't really interpret what the planning board had in mind at that time. I mean,
Unless
what's,
it got written down in the
Right.
decision, that's why these
right,
are
that's
really
why
important to be
the
done
written
correctly.
decisions govern, and so,
Right.
I mean, we certainly don't have the ability to look at it now and say, you know what, I think that street lamp's ugly and we want a better one.
Put it that way.
Right, so, I think we're sort of stuck with whatever is in the decision. You
Well,
guys,
it says, the streetlight shall be located at the end of the cul-de-sac, the streetlight shall be owned by the city. The developer will either purchase and install the lights and turn them over to the city during street acceptance, or determine the cost of the lights and forward a check to the city for the purchase of the lights. So the city could have purchased the light ourselves, but we didn't like what he picked out.
Right.
So, I mean, I
So
might have to,
I
I might have to
assume-
touch base with Jim Gracia and figure out if he can remember some of this stuff.
but I assume that decision, the subcommittee has that decision, right?
Yeah.
Right,
Got
okay, so I mean, I think that's the only ruling, that's why we've been working on getting better written decisions now, so that we can
Goes in
have
the vague.
something to go back at, right? And it's vague and it's hard to, but I mean, Jim is right, I mean, the teeth now is that you guys don't have to release the public way, but I don't think we can do anything, I don't think we can clarify or hold their
Only
feet
what
to the
you have.
fire.
We absolutely can't, but I think if I mean, what she wants is, do you remember anything that we can use? And that's really the question is, do we remember anything from that that's helpful?
Yeah, but even things you may remember, if they're not in the written decision, I mean, you don't know that that
No.
was part of what was voted on.
But she
and-
can't use it
Yeah,
officially, is what
right.
you're saying,
You can't
yeah.
rely on it, so,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's dangerous territory.
We have I'm sorry.
No, I'm just concerned about how this happened. Is this something that the conditions were, like, some of this stuff wasn't done at the time that we released the lots, and then it wasn't completed to the city engineer's satisfaction? Or, because my understanding is our decision was based on the city engineer's
Yeah, and
It
he
is,
put
and I
signing
would
off
say,
on it, so
and I
what
would say
changed?
in the future, I think a better process would be for the planning board to do a site visit.
Yeah.
Before,
Yeah.
not just taking the city engineer's word that everything is up to par,
Yeah.
but to actually go out there, and even if you weren't a member of the board at the time of the decision, at least you can work down the list of the decision and say, yeah, this looks okay, this doesn't look okay, and I think that's where we have failed as a committee in this. Not that we have any, this is like the subdivision we have right now, but,
It's good to learn from this.
but I think
you're right.
as a learning experience, that this should be sort of more ingrained into the process, that the planning board actually goes out there and makes a site visit.
And
Agreed.
If I could just add, it was, the subcommittee went out with the city engineer on a site visit, and that's when we asked Jim, you know, like, well, what about this, what about this? And
Right.
kind of, again, like, he just gave you guys kind of a blanket, it's good, and then when
Right.
you started asking specifics, he wasn't quite as
Right.
sure, so. Again, I have no problem, we have a meeting later this week of going back, if it's okay with the board, and just saying that your decision is what it says, but you're more than willing to have the planner, if she can find any more information or, any more
Yeah.
documentation to bring it forward to the subcommittee,
Sure.
and we'll just have to make a decision, or
Yeah.
maybe she can work with the
The only
builder.
thing I can think of is
With
to
the
go back
builder.
into the minutes and see if there was anything about a
And,
land post
and you can work
discussed in the minutes.
between
Right.
Jen and yourself, work with the
Sure.
builder and see if
I
we
think
can't
that's all
come
we
to
can
some
do.
resolution, 'cause, you know, obviously, we'd like to get it
Right.
approved. 'cause-
What is there was a comment in her response back to us that the quality of the work wasn't up to
Well,
par.
I think a lot of it is, in other words, like, I think one of the exemptions the planning board gave was no granite curbing, this is just an example. And so, you know, we put the macadam berm in, well, now that he's had construction, a lot of it's kind of broken down and cracked
Yeah.
and stuff now. Is he gonna, you get what I'm saying, is he gonna, again, you didn't say you have to have granite, but he's gotta have the macadam, and we don't really wanna accept it, and then our DPW's down there 6 months later fixing the berm.
Right.
When we take it, we want the berm fixed, so. I think those were some of the questions about the quality of the work. And then there were some questions about where the open space was, he was supposed to, and that's piles of stuff is still there. And there's supposed to be a walkway in with a sign saying this is the Pasquanic?
Piscomic.
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 I always get that.
Tongue twister.
Trust to, you know, entrance so
Oh,
that.
for the path, yeah.
Right, so that people would have a pathway to get to the open space. That was part of the reason, I guess, for the way it was.
The other thing is that, I mean, not all of the houses have been built, and,
Yes.
you know, and so, and, you know, I guess this is more of a bigger picture, is should the city only be recommending public street acceptance of ways once every house is built? Because it is an active construction site, so that's why there's piles of
Right.
dirt in certain locations, and that's because not all, I think maybe half the lots have been sold and built on, and the other half are still, you know, for sale. So
Interesting.
it's going to be an active construction site until every single last house is built. And the Conservation Commission, that was one of our questions, cannot release that order of conditions until all of the houses that have wetlands jurisdictions have been built on. Now, not all of them have been, and not all of them have been sold, so that permit is gonna stay open until those houses are built or those lots are sold. So, you know,
They
that's
don't have
maybe a
to, they
bigger
don't have to
question.
come back before us at all anymore on this project, right? I mean,
No.
Once we release those lots.
No,
who knows?
conservation, you have to close out the permit, so.
Right.
See, I think that's what's driving, and we're trying to do a whole new street acceptance protocol
Right.
through the
Right.
city council, because, you know, there's been some state decisions through the inspector general that the city shouldn't be plowing these streets.
Right.
That the contractor should, and we plow a lot of private ways, and there's some of them, that are 14 years in the making of,
Right.
Yeah,
the city's been maintaining them, and they still haven't been approved, because they haven't met the
Right.
state. So I think we're trying to get that where
well, I think it's good to learn
there's some
from it.
teeth,
Yeah.
to motivate the contractors also.
And those asphalt curbing, they only last one season.
Right, because once the plow hits them.
Right,
Yeah.
once the plow hits them, they're toast, that's why we like
That's why
granite
you like the
curbings.
granite, yeah.
So, you know, maybe there's,
Right.
I don't know if there's, you know, as part of the discussion and dialogue of back and forth, but telling him, you know, he's gotta replace all of this curb and it's gotta be back to standard before the city will accept it again. And, you know, I don't know what that document is that would, you
Right.
know, if there's an agreement or if you just wanna hold off and sit on it until,
Because, I mean, if he fixes this and then.
and then
they
you
break it
plow
again.
next year, it's gonna get broken again, exactly.
Right.
So,
But I certainly, I appreciate it, and I'll report back to,
Yeah, I wish we could do more.
Counselor
both
Hayes
on the
that this was-
explanation and on the holding the feet to the fire, but I think we're kinda out of the loop now.
you're
And we're
bound
just,
by what's been
we're
decided.
just a written decision at this point,
Right,
for better or worse.
right, I hear you.
But
I think
if-
he wanted those lots released so that he could sell them, I think that's
Right.
really, you know, he was,
Well, and that's obviously the trade-off, right, to requiring that all the lots be built and sold before you approve a public way, is I'm sure it
Right.
makes projects easier when a developer can sell
Right.
them as they're going to fund the
Right.
rest of the project, so.
right, right,
Obviously, those cut both ways, but
right,
that's where we are now, so I guess
Okay.
we'll just,
all right,
eyes open going forward.
all right.
All right.
Thank you very much,
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Site
thank you
visits.
for staying.
Yeah, thanks.
More
Alright.
site visits.
Administrative items?
Just a couple, so, reminder that the CPTC Fall Workshop schedule is out. I know there was one in Northampton last week on site plan approval, I think the rest of them are farther away, but, you know, take those if you can. I do wanna talk about the meeting schedule for 2016. We had had some discussions in the past about having, setting up the schedule so that we would be able to use the bigger room upstairs if we need to. What I'd like to propose is that we move our meetings to the first and third Tuesdays of every month. That way, we're not conflicting with the school committee, and that way, if we ever need the large room upstairs, it's likely to be available. Because, like tonight, we could have used the large room, it would have been way more
Yeah,
comfortable.
yeah.
But the school committee was meeting, so we couldn't. I'm gonna have the same problem next meeting. We've got 3 permits on the agenda, it's gonna be a packed shack, and I'm trying to switch with the school committee to see whether I can get the upstairs room, because it's gonna be a humdinger. So for,
Yes.
we need to talk about the 27th in a minute, but, so, I'd like to propose that we meet the first and third Tuesdays. I know it's like going against what the planning board has done for like
We do second and
20
fourth
years.
now?
We do second and fourth.
Yeah.
And then that way, if it's just a couple of small administrative items and we don't think we're gonna have a big crowd, we can be down here. But if we feel like we need the big room upstairs because we think we're gonna have a crowd, we can use the room, and both rooms would be available if we switched it to
Yeah.
the first and third.
But that gives us the opportunity of having the room.
Does anybody have a problem with
I
that?
do.
You do?
You
Yeah,
do.
it's a big problem.
Okay.
So I love everything you just said, except for I think it would be best to keep that as the standard and then have it, like you said, if we needed something small to hide here. But the standard of the meeting should be up there and set the tone of
Okay.
not we're going to take that meeting this time because we need it, but that's where we meet.
Okay.
And we'll take this only if we need some, smaller, more intimate setting. I think the standard should be that the planning board meets up there. That's my comment on it.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I think it lends itself to a more sort of professional setting and
Okay.
makes people take it a little more seriously. I think if it's available.
Okay, but the
That's
first
great.
and thirds generally work with everybody sitting here, there's no other conflicts for days.
This will be starting in January.
I was gonna say starting in January, cause I have to start putting the 2016 calendar together for permits coming in for the end of the year.
First and third.
So, that was, I just think it makes it
It's awesome.
A few months
That's
months
great.
lead time. I think
a few
we can
months
all
lead time,
change our schedules.
and,
Do
Change
we
the-
require a motion?
I don't
no,
think so.
it's just
It's just
administrative.
an
Yeah.
administrative thing, but, okay. I didn't, before I started putting together that 2016 calendar, I just wanted to run it by, and then it will be upstairs as the standard.
That makes me happy. Thank you,
Yes,
Jessica.
thank you for figuring that out.
Okay. And then the last thing is we need to talk about quorum check for next week. We have, if you need hard copies, please stay after the meeting and I will provide you with hard copies of the permits. We've got, 2 site plan approvals, one for a, downtown location on Union Street. We have a site plan approval for a new gym at the Highway Business District, right next to Nikki D's, the new, just that building that got revamped, that was sold, it was
Old
an
A&B
auto
Auto,
sales,
yeah.
yep, A&B Auto got sold and got revamped. That's a site plan approval. And then Fort Hill Brewery has submitted an application for their special permit. Jesse needs to recuse himself from that decision since his law firm is representing the applicant. So, I absolutely need to have 4 people for that meeting, and, I hear
Which one
rumors.
is that?
The 27th, and I hear that you're maybe traveling, Chet, and you may be not available.
No, I think.
Cancel all plans, Chet.
It's a big one,
Takes
Chad.
priority.
Take one for the team.
The big one is where I'm going.
Are you gonna be gone?
No, I'll be back.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, cause
I'll
there's
be
Jim,
here.
I mean, there's also Jim Valancourt, that's why he's an associate, I haven't,
Right.
he's not here, so I haven't checked.
No,
with him.
because my wife had changed the day that we were going to start coming back, so that gives us a day earlier.
I think we
Okay.
should notify Jim to try and be there regardless.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I'll make sure,
Just in
And
case.
and I will be. I mean, I can do. I haven't
You can
seen
be
the
there for-
applicants, but I believe I can be there for the other.
You
site
could be there
plan
for the
approvals,
first
yeah.
2, and then you would probably, and that, I set it up in that order, for a reason, so that Jesse could essentially leave and you wouldn't have to stay for the 3rd one. So, okay, we'll,
have you already sent out all the information we need about the Fort Hill thing,
I
or we're
haven't
gonna
sent
be getting?
anything,
Okay.
no, I haven't sent anything, I just processed everything last week, I was not in the office today, so, I just processed it all on Thursday last week.
Okay.
And the legal ad for it just ran today, the first legal ad ran today in the paper.
Okay.
So,
There was an editorial in the paper today about it. There was.
oh, there was?
There
There's
was,
been a
Joe
ton.
Cole
there
wrote
was
it.
one.
There's been a ton
Yeah.
of press, yeah.
Yeah,
Did
they
you,
had
were
a
you
lot
at the
of
meeting?
press.
Did you go to the meeting?
That will be an upstairs
I wasn't
meeting room.
there,
for
but I
That will
sure.
be an
watch-
upstairs meeting room, so I'm
I'm gonna
trying to
watch the
switch it around so we'll be
recording.
upstairs.
Okay.
Okay?
I'll tell you what's really tough, is sitting at a meeting like that, and you know what you approved.
All right,
And you're
let's,
sitting there listening to this,
let's wait, let's wait,
And
let's.
it really is disturbing.
Seriously, let's
have
wait,
to
and we'll
wait.
do it at the public hearing in 2
Yeah,
weeks.
public hearing will take care of that.
All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
You got it.
And I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, all right, thank you all.